Hey guys, welcome back to our gospel-centered marriage and parenting Bible studies. It's just weird and sad that we can't be together, but we're glad to continue these for you via our YouTube page and via these videos. So just glad to have you back. Want to add one thing that you can do since we're not live and in person. We've created an email called askus@cfcpca.org. That's askus@cfcpca.org. Please be willing to send your questions in, and Chad or I or others will answer them. We may even do a video answering those questions. But last week we did sort of deviate from our pattern of talking about now gospel-centered parenting and just talked about surviving the pandemic. We're going to jump back to our series on gospel-centered parenting. And just as a reminder, we had defined parenting as working to create a safe and then differentiated community in mission. That what a family really is, and I want to face the camera, what a family really is, it's a place where we create a safe, differentiated community in mission. And before we had to stop because of the virus, we talked about what it meant to be safe. And now tonight we're going to talk about what really it means to be differentiated. And it's not a word we use a lot, I admit, but it's a word, there's a lot of things I mean by it, I'll define it, but what we're talking about tonight is really creating healthy individuals in your family. That a family is one unit, but it's one unit made up of different individuals who understand themselves and understand their place in their family. So let me read for us the parable of the prodigal son. This is what we've been thinking about. This is in Luke chapter 15, beginning in verse 11. You know the story, but I want you to think about this father's relationship to his two sons who are very different. And I want us to think about how he's different than them, how he is not enmeshed too much in their lives. He's also not too distant from them, but he lives in a healthy balance of love and community with them. So it says, Luke 15, chapter 11, Jesus continued, there was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to the fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one would give him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death. I will set out and go to my father and say to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, he saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to the servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing, so he called one of his servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in, so the father went out and pleaded with him. But he said to his father, 'Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, that you never gave me even a young calf so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fatted calf for him.' 'My son,' he said, 'you are always with me and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.'" So a healthy home is really demonstrated in this man's home that we just read about. And I want you to recognize that neither of these sons are really sons you would be proud of. One son squandered his wealth. He hoped his dad was dead. He went to another country and there wasted all of that wealth. Ended up in poverty, probably had diseases, was a social outcast. The other son stayed home and was obedient and yet did not trust his father. And yet this is a healthy home, because I think this father here demonstrates how we are to relate to our children. He demonstrates what it means to create a healthy home, even though there weren't necessarily healthy children in it. I want you to hear me say that again. He demonstrates what it is to have a healthy home, even though there weren't necessarily healthy children in it. And what he shows us is that he created a place where he loved his children, where he tried to mature his children, he tried to help his children follow Christ, but he was in some sense differentiated from them. So as we think about what I mean by differentiated, I want you to recognize that there's kind of two poles. And one pole would be enmeshed. How do I spell enmeshed, Chris? Seriously. E-M...
That is way above my...
Man, I don't know how to spell enmeshed either. E-M-I-S-H-E-D. That's probably misspelled.
Enmeshed?
Enmeshed. So one is too close, and the other pole is too far. So there's parenting that can be too close to the child, enmeshed in the child, but there's also parenting that can be too separated from the child, too far from the child. And what this father demonstrates is what a healthy, balanced home is for us. And what I want us to see is that a person who is differentiated deeply, deeply loves their child. Just loves their child, but is also able to not have their children drag them around emotionally and manipulate them. So I might say this, that a differentiated person is someone who develops a sense of themselves as an autonomous person. The most fundamental question they consider is, am I living and pursuing what God really wants me to be? What really matters to God? And what gives meaning to my life as a Christian? Or am I living based on what my mom and dad taught me, what my culture teaches me, and not who I really need to be in Christ? A differentiated person is someone who is neither enmeshed nor who is too distant from their child. And so I want to talk about what it looks like as parents to try to raise children the way this father did, where he deeply loved them. When he sees the son coming home, he runs out, throws his arms around him, hugs him, immediately puts a ring on his finger saying, "That's my family's ring." Puts the nicest, it says, "This is my son, I love him." And yet he's really messed up. And then loves a son who can't celebrate grace. Says, "I want you to come in and celebrate your brother coming home." And he won't. And the father doesn't stay with that son in his anger, but goes back into the party and celebrates. Neither of these sons is able to sway the maturity and the character of the father, even though I'm sure the father hurt deeply for his two sons, one that ran away and one that stayed home. So this is kind of what I mean by differentiated. It means to be a person who knows who they are and why they do what they do, who is able to fully give themselves to other people without being manipulated by those people. And so I want to talk about what it looks like for us to raise healthy children, which means that we're ourselves, in my use of the language, differentiated, and the children are sort of also differentiated too. So I'm going to make sort of two big points with some sub-points. And my first point I want you to hear, and what it means to raise healthy children, is that you have to become a healthy parent. The first way you raise healthy children is that you become a healthy parent. So a healthy parent is someone who loves their children, but who does not live their life through their children. So let me say that again. A healthy parent is someone who loves their children, but who does not live their life through their children. When I drop my child off at the Little League game, I'm dropping him or her off. I'm not dropping myself off. I love my kids. I would lay down my life for my kids, but my kids are not me. And I am a healthy person when I recognize that even though I had one child rebel and one child stay home that everybody admired, I can see them both for who they are, both their weaknesses and strengths, and I can love them. I love my kids, but I don't live my life around them or for them. Happy parents, parents who raise happy children, are happy apart from their children. And what I mean by this is certainly when my children have been very, very sad, and certainly when this father's children were sad and went to a farm, he was sad for them. And yet he continued to be a happy person. He continued to live his life. His happiness, or we might say his healthiness, was not dependent on their happiness. We weep when our children are hurt. There's a right way to defend our children, but we are different from them. We have a calling from God to be parents, to work in our professional field, to have friends, and we are healthy when we're happy apart from our kids. Our happiness is no longer dependent upon whether our children are happy. Because some of you have children who just can't be happy. I mean, they just were born with that personality type, and so they're not happy. And if your happiness is dependent on their happiness, you'll never be happy. And yet the scriptures say that we're happy, we're glad, we have joy because of the salvation we have, not because of the children we have. Again, child breaks their arm, a child is sick, we hurt, we long, and yet there's something different. We don't want to be parents who try to live our lives through living our kids. The way you have a healthy home and the way you begin to develop healthy children is that you're a healthy person and not an unhealthy person. You're not someone who is so enmeshed in their children that every feeling they have, you try to rescue. Every hurt they have, you try to stop. Every longing they have, you try to fulfill. But you are different from them and love them. But you're also true, and I need to say this, that you're not so far from them that you don't care what's going on with them. There are parents who have children who say, take care of yourself, raise yourself, and that's not what we're saying either. We're saying that a healthy parent, a healthy home, where a child can be nurtured is a place where we, as parents, have become healthy. We've become holy. We've become godly. We're followers of Jesus Christ who follow Christ and not our kids. We invite our kids to follow us. We're not enmeshed with them. We're separated from them. We're healthy. So my first big point is, if you want to raise healthy kids, you have to become healthy people. Unhealthy people, unholy people can't suddenly raise holy kids. God might raise those kids up to be holy and healthy and happy, but He can't do it. He can do it, but you won't do it in a home where you're unhealthy. And I just want to say, many of you had children and hoping that the children would make you happy because your marriage is not happy, and that won't happen. You and your husband have to become a healthier couple in order to raise healthier children and not to live in a sort of child-centered world. If we look to another person, our spouse, another thing, a job, another person, our child, for our happiness, for something to center us, we will crush that thing. We will kill that thing. That thing, that husband, that job, the money, the child, when we make it the center, we kill it. When we let children be the center of our home, we kill it. And we're going to talk next week about a community, a differentiated community. You have to create a different center from your home than children. So the first big point is that parents have to become healthy parents to raise healthy children. My second big point, and this really has several subpoints, is, and I just want to talk about very practically, well, what do we do then, John, if we understand that we need to be healthy? If we understand that we have to have an identity in Christ and not just an identity as mom and dad, what do we have to do to raise our kids in a healthy or holy way, what do we have to do? And I would say the first thing we have to do is that we have to raise kids who, as a sub point to the second point. So let's instead of saying the first thing, let's say under point 2, what do we have to do? Let's say A, we have to raise kids, pardon me, who feel loved apart from works. This is a big deal. So this is the biggest deal you can do for your kids. So in our story, when this kid comes home from wasting money and squandering wealth, when his father sees him coming home, the son has this planned speech. And his father saw him, was filled with compassion for him. Notice the father had been living a healthy, normal life at home. All these years that son was gone. Didn't send a campus minister after, didn't send letters after him. It would be okay if he did, but he was living a whole life when this son left. That's amazing. Doesn't mean he didn't hurt. Doesn't mean there wasn't a hole, but he continued to live in his calling as a Christian. When he sees him coming, he's filled with compassion. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. And the son said, "Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father stopped him and said, "Put the best robe on him and put a ring on his finger, and let's kill the fatted calf." And what the father was saying there, this is the most important thing you can hear from me. Chris is here in the room with me, that Chris can hear from me. Your children have to feel loved apart from their works, period. This is how Jesus relates to you. You can learn to be loved. You are loved by Christ apart from what you do. And this father loves this son apart from his evil. But he also loves the older son apart from his self-righteousness. The older son is self-righteous. Look, all these years I've labored for you and I've done my duty and you've never given me a fatted calf. And the dad's like, you never asked for one. Come in the party. I'll give you whatever you want. Everything I have is yours, son. I love you. Both of these sons are demonstrated love apart from works. And you'll never create a healthy child, what I'm calling a differentiated child, until you begin to love them apart from works. If you love them because they're a good student, if you love them because they're a good athlete, if you love them because they don't embarrass you, or if you love them because they make other people think good things about you, you don't love them. You love yourself. Healthy parenting loves a child apart from what they do. We raise them to feel loved apart from works. We raise them to feel love apart from works. I can't emphasize enough to you how you saying to your child, "I love you and I'm proud of you," apart from whatever they do, is the most important gift you'll ever get them. Of you just saying to them, "I'm proud of you," when they're messing up sometimes. We're going to talk about discipline, not this particular evening. We're going to talk about corrective measures, sure. But the way you begin to create a healthy child is you raise them to feel loved apart from works. Your children have to know you love them. They have to know you love them. That when they've messed up, they can come home. And when they realize they've stayed home and it hadn't been enough, you still love them. Actually loving your child for who they are is a big deal. The first thing we have to do is raise them to feel love apart from works. But the second thing we have to do is we have to raise them as a part of a family, not the center of a family. So a healthy family, we want them to be a part of, not the center. Means that a family is like a circle. So here's dad, here's mom, here's child 1, here's child 2, here's child 3. And a better image is that we are a circle. We all form a circle. We're all part of this thing called a family. And we're not having mom and dad surrounding child 1, 2, and 3. We don't want our children to think they're the center of our family. We want them to think they're a welcome part of our family, but they're not the reason our family exists. Our family does not simply exist to have children. Our family exists because there's a marriage there. Our family exists that we might bless one another. Our family exists that we might begin to serve one another and care for one another and know one another. It's one of the building blocks of any healthy culture, a family. But we want families where the children are not the center of them. When we make the children the center of our family and not simply a part of the family, when the children fail, the family fails. And I want you to know that in the story in Scripture, one of the children failed massively, and yet this is not a story of a failed family. These children were a part of this family, but they were not the center of the family. And what this means is we make them a welcome member of our family without them having to be the controlling one of the family. The family should be controlled by the whole and not by any individual part. The dad shouldn't control the family. The mom shouldn't. The children shouldn't. So let me ask you some questions. What does this mean? This means that we raise children and we understand that they will feel the fall. I think many parents have promised themselves, I'm going to keep my children from feeling the effects of a fallen, sinful world. And I certainly understand that as we have infants and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds. But there's a certain time, there's a certain age where we cannot protect them from the fall. And so if we want them to be a part of this, then we have to admit that our children, we don't want to create it, but we know that they will suffer. And we cannot stop that suffering. We cannot stop the suffering. They will suffer, but we can't stop the suffering. And therefore, we have to teach them to be responsible for their own emotional health. We have to teach them to be responsible for their own homework. We have to teach them to be responsible for their own money. We have to teach them to be responsible for their brothers and sisters' well-being. They're there to be responsible for themselves. What it means to be an emotionally healthy person is each part of the family does their job so that the whole is stronger than any particular part. And so raising children means we teach them that they are responsible for their emotions, not their parents. They're responsible for their homework, not their parents. They're responsible for taking care of money, not us. Of course we give them money. But we're teaching them to be adults. We're growing them in maturity. We're not simply taking care of them and protecting them from these things, but we're inviting them to be responsible for themselves. Let me say it this way. Are you raising your child to leave? Or are you raising your child to stay? See, the parent that is really trying to raise a mature child is preparing them to leave. That means they'll suffer. They'll have to be responsible for money. They'll have to be responsible for their emotions. They'll have to be responsible for themselves. And we teach them that. We don't protect them from that. I mean, the parent that says, hey, I need you to go apologize for what you did, and then the child doesn't, so the parent goes and apologizes to the person for them, is raising an unhealthy child. The parent says, you need to do this homework, and the child says, I don't want to do the homework. They don't respond to appropriate corrective discipline or appropriate corrective encouragement or however, and the parent says, therefore I'll do it. You're raising an immature child. We want you to be a part of the family, not a center of it. And what that means is we want to teach you to be responsible for yourselves. We teach our children to take care of themselves. Are we there? Yes. But what did this father do? This is a crazy story, right? This father sent his son into the far country And he let him waste his wealth. He let him stop using his wealth, like just waste it and get sick. And he didn't intervene. He was prepared for the kid to suffer and to learn the consequences of it. He let the kid learn about not doing his homework, about getting cut from a baseball team. He let him learn what happens when his emotions get out of control without protecting him. He was differentiated from his child, so when his child failed, he did not see himself as a failure because he was healthy and he knew that the process would help that child grow up. This is really hard. B says we want them to be a part of, but not the center of our family. We want them to learn to be responsible for themselves in a family. So, we raise them to be a part of, but not a center of our family. So we need them to feel loved apart from works. We need them to be a part of the family without being a center of the family. And remember, this is all in the context of a healthy parent who recognizes I can be a healthy and a holy person. I can be the person God made me, even if my child is not what I want them to be. But also, and I'm going to need to create some space here by erasing it, we want to teach our children, and I think this is probably going to help you do the first two things better. The more that we can see, the more that we can teach our children to be responsible for others. The more we teach them to be responsible for others, the more mature they'll be. Notice that the older brother distances himself from his brother, is ashamed of his brother, and doesn't draw near to his brother, is not happy that his brother came home, because no one had taught him to be responsible for others. Helping your children enter into the service of others. I mean, what I'm about, the advice I'm going to give is hard. Helping your kids learn to help their siblings do their chores, to help their siblings make up their beds, to help their siblings remember their homework, to actually help their siblings do their homework. And it's harder. Let me encourage you as parents. It'll be much harder for them to do it for their brothers and sisters than for their friends. Your children are going to serve their friends far more than they are their brothers and sisters in their family. I know that's not good. I know that's confusing, but I can just tell you that Marissa and I always were a little concerned, like, do our daughters care about each other? They were kind of at each other's throats, and home was a safe place, and then they went out in the community, and we realized in other people's eyes they were beautiful servants. But you want to teach your kids to be responsible for others. It's good to teach them to care for a dog. It's good to put one sibling, say, is he dressed right? Or did he do this? Not as a tattletale, but how do we learn that we're here to serve other people? The father thought he was there to serve other people. He served the son who went into the far country. He served the son who stayed home and hated him. His life was about them. All I have is yours, he says to the older son. He was responsible for others. So teaching our kids to be responsible for others is a big deal. And I'll use this illustration in both this point and sort of the last point. It is invaluable for you as parents, as soon as might be appropriate, to get your kids out serving strangers. So when your kids get to be, and I don't know what age it is, but it's usually sooner than you want it to be, but let's say 10, 11, and 12, taking them to a safe homeless shelter and letting them serve food to the homeless. Taking them to a place where they're giving away coats for the winter. Taking them to where they're giving showers to the homeless. Taking them, in where we live in Tucson, to the border to see what's going on at the border. How do you serve people who've been displaced from their family? Taking your child on a mission trip to another country will be one of the most powerful tools God gives you as a parent to help your children get outside of their world and to see that they were made to serve others. Our children went on mission trips, and when they did, they always came back changed. They had a better perspective on their stuff. They had a better perspective on why they were here. it's hard to teach responsibility for others. You have to sort of put kids in a situation where they see, like, if I don't bring food, if I don't build, if I don't jump in, if I don't love, this will fail. These people need me. Often the world we create in a healthy family, and this is a good thing, is my sibling doesn't really need me. My sibling's doing okay. Helping your child get to places where they are needed and can serve helps your child grow up. It helps your child become a whole person. Often in the way that we school, in the way that we do life, and the way we think about sports teams, and I'm not interested in changing that. Maybe the gospel will change it, but I'm not. But the way we do it, we create narcissists. Do your homework, be excellent, be the best player on your team, hustle harder, pick up the bat for that guy. We need to take our children to places where they go, hey, Mom and Dad, this is chaos. Like, this is unfixable. That's right. That's exactly right. The world's unfixable, and you're responsible for it. What did they say? He killed his brother in the garden. Who is my brother's keeper? Well, you are your brother's keeper. And teaching your children to be responsible for others is a big deal. You will not do it well in your home. You'll actually do it better outside of your home. And your children will do it better with others than in the home. But helping them feel that the world needs them and showing them places where it needs them is absolutely vital to helping them become a whole person. So they begin to say, I will sacrifice for my siblings. I will sacrifice for my neighbor. So raising them to take responsibility for others. We want to help them be loved. Apart from works, we help them to take responsibility for themselves and the family. We want them to take responsibility for others. And finally, and this is actually the hardest one, but I think we need to say it, D. We need to help them take responsibility for their faith. So, you all know me. I believe the Bible is the Word of God. I believe Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. I'm an evangelical. I want my children to believe that Jesus, because it's true that Jesus is the only name by which people can be saved. Jesus is the only way people go to heaven. Jesus is the maker of heaven and earth. He's the King of kings. This is what I want everybody to believe, and especially my children. But it's important that I allow my children and help my children be responsible for their faith and not my faith. As you wander through the teenage years, as your teenagers wander through their teenage years, at some point, whether it's at 13 or 19, they're going to question the faith in Jesus that you have as you pass it on. And you need to be okay with that. You don't need to panic. You don't need to become angry. You don't need to make them read books. You need to give them the freedom to explore what you believe and what they believe. This will especially happen to students in Christian schools. Because they're in Christian schools, because they're not around a lot of non-Christians, it's sometimes harder for them to process their faith. They may have faith, but at a place like Push Ridge, for instance, it can be harder for them to be responsible for their faith because there are so many people teaching it, so many people helping them learn it, that they're not sure what they think. When you go into a pagan environment, or you go to another country where nobody believes in Jesus, it's crystal clear what you believe, and you've got to decide, is it true? Helping them be responsible for their faith is crucial. And I would tell you again, as often as you can get your kids into a mission endeavor, and as often as you can get your kids around in safe places, non-Christians, not as their teachers in their classrooms, if they go to public schools, that's fine, but when you get your kids around non-Christians, they're going to more quickly take responsibility for their faith than they will inside of your home. Because they have to decide if they believe it. It scares the bejeebies out of parents when their child comes home and says, I don't know if I believe this. I don't know if the Bible's true. That's an absolutely scary question for a parent. The Bible is clear. Eternity hangs in the balance for what we think about who Jesus is, how we think about His Word, how we think about what truth is, how we think about salvation. But as a parent, giving your kid the ability to go into the far country with their faith, to examine what they believe, and trusting Jesus with them is crucial. If you immediately run to them and begin to lecture them when they have doubts, or tell them to read this book when they have doubts, you actually may push them further away. One of the important things you need to pray for your children is they'll have mentors that are not your family. My children felt much safer with other youth pastors than me, with other youth workers, with young life workers. And for our children at one season, we allowed them to go to a youth group not at our church. There's nothing wrong with our youth group. We had youth pastors who loved Jesus Christ, and our girls loved them, but they often attended another youth group for social reasons, but also because it was a little safer. We let our daughters go see what other churches believe. These were basically evangelical churches, but they didn't believe exactly everything I believed. And because our children were exposed to different ways of thinking, because they had to sit at times in front of non-Christians and really answer the non-Christians' questions, they had to own their faith. It wasn't just, here's what my mom believes, here's what my dad believes, here's what Chris Hollow, my youth pastor, believes, here's what John Stone, my pastor, believes, here's what I believe. There's no simple way to do this. But I tell you the way you don't do it. You don't say, honey, that's not what you believe this. You don't go back to the first point and go, I need you to believe in this for me to love you. You don't need to imply that if they don't love Jesus, they're not welcome in your home. They're not welcome in your family. The hardest thing a parent does is help a child become responsible for their faith and not for your faith. This is what it means to raise differentiated children. It means that we raise children who know they're loved, apart from what they do, even in point 4. It means that we have kids who begin to be responsible for themselves. We want kids to grow up and leave and not stay. We're not raising kids to live at home with us, but actually to go out into the world and serve their community. We're raising kids to go out in mission, to love other people. And we're raising kids who understand their faith, which we want to be the faith in Jesus Christ. But acknowledging that some people come to faith when they're 30, some come to 25, that we as mom and dads can't demand they come to faith. We give them the freedom, even as God our Father did in this parable, to go into the far country. That's what it means to raise differentiated children and to have a beautifully differentiated family. Now let me remind you as I end, we're really sad you're not here. We're sad we're not eating dinner with you on a Sunday night, but love to answer your questions. Ask us at cfcpca.org, and we look forward to being with you next week. Until then, see you later.